when it came to the PAB rules of procedure. And so this time, it seems as though the rules of procedure were changed, or recommendations for changes to the PAB rules of procedure went to the commissioners without having come to the PAB. Is that correct?
Again, I do not know the history. I can definitely ask, and we can have Dave come in to talk about the rules and procedures.
Okay, so the second part of that was there were some recommendations that were made to the commissioners on the PAB rules of procedure this year. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe he did, and that was one of the things he wanted to present to the group.
Okay, so I guess the question is, and maybe you can answer this, is that his intent to ask whether we like these proposed changes during this agenda item, or is he just going to tell us about them?
That I don't know. I cannot read Dave's mind, and I'm not sure. We have not had a conversation about it.
Okay. Mr. Chair, do you know?
I believe he wanted to put forward his presentation, and whether or not it was up for discussion afterwards. I mean, I would hope he would be willing to take feedback from the members of the PAB. I think that would be extremely constructive for him to do so. But from my understanding, any of the procedures that he's put forward to the commission has not been adopted yet,
Not yet.
by the commission. No.
They won't do that until later.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So we're assuming then that he will be putting forward these proposed changes, and then the PAB will vote on it and take that recommendation to the
Yes.
commissioners. Okay. I just wanted to try to figure out if it was useful to try to do that earlier in the meeting. My thought is it might be, because this is kind of hanging over the whole group until we have that discussion. I would suggest that it might be, I would move that we ask that be moved up into the agenda, and I don't know where, because I don't know what his availability is going to be.
Okay, we can reach out to Dave to see what his availability is.
Yep. I know what he's going to finish the AM, and we available at 4. So I will message him.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there anything that the PAB wants to add to other business? Jessie?
Mr. Chair, if I can, under other business, I would like to add a place to discuss the size limits that Alan Hicks talked about today and adjusting those. I'm not sure if that goes under the MSC update or if we should have that under other business. But.
So if we could, I guess, we'll keep the agenda, but the line item points, we'll make them flexible.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm not sure if Heather made the full motion.
Okay.
You might have a motion on the table.
Okay, sorry, Heather.
That's all right.
Need
I
a
think
second.
you accepted it anyway. So.
Does anyone second Heather's motion?
Second.
Okay, John. And I will ask if anyone opposes.
I guess, Carl, I say too,
Okay,
in the
speak
past,
to it,
the
yes.
agenda's always been fairly fluid
Yes.
based on,
Availability.
Ian Stewart come in,
Yes.
Dave Wilson's gonna come in, so their time situation has always made this
Yeah.
agenda fairly fluid.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way we've always done, that's how it's been handled.
Yeah, so I'm just asking if anyone else wants to add anything to the agenda as well. Mark?
Mr. Chairman, just wanted to, one of these little things, staring at me. One of the things that I would like to bring up, I've been involved in this, Mr. Woodruff, in the first meeting was about 26, 28 years ago, in the we did when it started, but the world has changed in that amount of time. And I'd like to have a discussion, if we could, about other halibut fisheries around the world that are really important to the centricity of the Northwest fishery, which is no longer in its position of power and prestige. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still important. But I would also like to have a discussion with that, because I think it would be a good opportunity with people around here, processors and other folks, just to bring it out. Again, I talked to some of the commissioners, Bruce even 10 years ago didn't know anything about East Coast fishery, which was astounding at the time, and even talking about Loverson and other folks. I think and John and I were discussing this too, that the centrality of this halibut here in the Northwest is no longer true. So I think we should bring that up and discuss it if it matters, if it works for everyone to do that.
Yeah, we can make time for that, definitely.
You have a motion in a second, you have to call for the question.
We have to vote.
You have to vote.
Yes.
Sorry.
So can we vote to
Approve the agenda.
approve the agenda? Can I add something to the agenda as well?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I just thought of something. I would like to, under other business, just have go back to the PAB's input in the accreditation process for new members. Yeah, it could be.
Sure, I may.
Yes.
The only other question I had, I know in previous years, we've tried to address fishing periods and regulatory proposals on the first day and perhaps moved mortality limits towards the end of the meeting. Is that something that we want to adjust, or are we just going to keep that fluid as we wait for people to come in and present? I'm fine with it the way that it is. We will just leave it the way it is.
Okay. So now I will put forward a motion to approve the agenda. Anyone opposed? No. Okay, so next item up is the IPHC Secretary informal session. Would the membership like to have Ian Stewart come in and to talk to his mortality limits? He doesn't need to give the full presentation, but if people have questions for him, he's more than happy to answer. John?
Yes.
Okay. If you could please find out what his availability is. And again, I'm sure people have questions for the MSE update as well, so whether Ellen Hicks or Dr. Stewart is available.
So you don't want to type in the chat.
So while we wait for them, I'll move on to the next agenda of fishing
Need
periods.
to message them? Yeah, that'd be great.
Does anyone have any idea on when they would like the fishing season to start or close? And I'll open it up to the floor. John?
Well, I'll suggest, as we always have, that we start about the 10th of March, and John's looking at the tides.
Okay.
So start at the proper tidal time for that opening, and then the close on the 15th of November prior to Thanksgiving, knowing that it's never going to fly. But I think the U.S. side is going to be hard. They're going to be hard set on not before the 1st of March because of the regulatory issues they have. And, last year I think we were in December, I think it was December 7th. And I don't believe it'll be any later than that, again, because of regulatory issues, accounting issues. So I would move that we, what's the date? Open on March 15th and close on November 10th.
John, just for the Canadian delegation members, would you be able to relay some of that feedback that you heard on the U.S. process on getting the licenses issued?
Yeah, so on the U.S. side, black cod is tied to halibut. It's regulatorily tied to halibut. So when halibut opens, blackout opens too. When blackout opens, halibut opens as well. And I think originally it was a bycatch issue, but those two come together. And the US side is also an IFQ fishery. And so the blackout quota is established in December at the North Pacific Council meeting. And there's a process because they make a recommendation, it goes to the Secretary of Commerce. That person decides what the quota will actually be. And then the numbers come out, and it takes NIMS, the regulatory body, some time to take those total quotas and divide them up into the quota shares that become the right to fish. And so I think in the past, it's been very clear to me that NIMS has said, hey, there's no chance we're going to open up before the 1st of February. And really, we need to, by the time they issue the quota, then you've got to get the quota to the quota holder. And maybe it's gotten faster, but I know in the past, it's been a 2-week process just from the time the quota is actually issued until the time that quota holders get the actual piece of paper that says they have quota. So that's why I think last year we got pushed back until I think it was the 7th of March. I think we'll get pushed back again no matter what. And I think and the other piece of this is, in the end, the conference board's going to recommend the longest possible time, and they're going to win. At least that's in history. So I guess I think we just come up with some dates that we think make sense. And for us, the U.S. side, trying to sell halibut after about the 10th, which means the 15th by the time the fish is about get delivered to port and to the marketplace. You're bumping up to Thanksgiving. That's a hard time. Everybody knows that. And that time between Christmas, Thanksgiving and Christmas is not much better. So, and the marketplace is actually filled by the east side guys, the East Coast guys. I think that's right. So I suggest that's the 2 days. How about that?
Okay, thank you, John. Is there a second to the motion?
Carl wants
Yeah.
to talk. Carl wants to talk. I mean,
Oh, sorry.
oh my God, Norm.
Norm wants to discuss. Sorry, before the second.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, Norm.
Okay, I was going to second, but I think somebody already did to the March 10th to November 15th. Did somebody do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was it 10th or was it
I
March
have the
15th?
15th.
It was March 15th, Norm.
No, he said that
Oh, I thought I heard 10th.
Okay, sorry.
the official one.
Okay, 15th.
Oh, 15th to the 15th?
10th to the 15th, sorry.
Okay.
15th to the 10th. It's March 15th because
Sorry.
that's the best tied to the
Okay.
10th of November.
Okay, sorry.
That's
My sorry. My fault.
Sorry, Carl.
And then to the 10th of November.
He originally
But
said.
if, Norm, if you have an amendment, a friendly amendment, I'm wide open.
No, those dates are fine, John. Thank you. That 5 days doesn't make much difference to me. As a matter of fact, I prefer moving it back. So I'll just speak to this quickly. I'm at the PAB because I'm now part of the processing group, but I have 40 years plus of being a participant in the fishery. And, processors as a whole are not really thrilled about moving this, myself included, about pushing the date farther and farther into the winter months for obvious reasons. And we closed our plant before Thanksgiving this year and before the season closed, just due to those constraints. But I think something that really needs to get pushed out there to the conference board, and I don't know if they're talking about it or not, but in my mind is the safety issue. And I spoke to this last year of pushing our fishermen out there later and later in the season, worse and worse weather. We were fortunate this year, I think, in that we didn't have any losses, but I know there were guys out there fishing when they shouldn't have been and taking chances. And, I was in at the beginning of the IFQ conversation, and one of the big selling points for developing IFQs was the safety aspect of not having to fish when the weather was terrible. And certainly you don't have to fish, but if you are a a fisherman that is fishing quota for other people and you have signed on the dotted line to get that done, you're pretty well forced to go out there and catch that fish. So I would just ask that we convey that message to the conference board and to the commission that is a concern, that it's not just about inconvenience to the processor group, but it's also a matter of, maintaining the safety aspect as best we can. Thank you.
Bruce?
Yeah, we're a Canadian processor, and we've got several fishing boats, and we've got hundreds of years of fishing and processing experience as well. And I remember when we went quota in the very beginning, and safety was cited as a concern. But I'm finding that the closing date was a safety concern just as bad in this last year. We've got guys that have a deadline looming, and they have quota still in the water. Instead of picking better weather days, they're fishing into this deadline. And I had some boats fishing in horrific weather to get their quotas finished in time. And instead of having the latitude to pick other days and avoid the bad storms. So I think I can say the same statement. That's the deadline creates a safety concern for our fleet.
Thanks.
Yes, Jessie.
Just briefly, yesterday at the U.S. delegation, we had a fellow from NOAA who just made it very clear that the U.S. can't, on the admin side, really start any earlier than we did this year or go any later, just in terms of being able to get people their quota and the permits before the season starts in March, and then also having that 3 weeks at the end of the season to do all of their accounting and admin work that they need before the end of the year. I'm not sure if that got through to the CB, but I think he made a very, very big request to both John and the commissioners and also to us and the CB that they don't ask for anything more than they have gotten. So just something to keep in mind.
Nick?
Yeah, I think a March 15th start date, usually we open on the weekend. That kind of gives us fish for the middle of the week. If we open on March 15th, we're kind of pulling in a lot of fish for that weekend. We're behind the marketing aspect. I would propose that we go back to John's original date of March 10th, which we've seen the last couple of years, we've seen to be opening on the Friday instead of the Saturday, which we've done for a few years in the past. And then, just in terms of that final date, I agree that whatever date we choose, it does make a deadline. However, I think the longer that we prolong that out, we're actually giving the fleet more flexibility where, I remember November was some really terrible weather, but then the first week of December, the last week of November was actually decent to fish in Canada at that time. So thankfully, we actually had some good weather days where guys could actually go out and harvest their balance of the quota that they needed to. So I would offer a friendly amendment to go March 10th and then, November 30th is what I would recommend. Because, what we've seen over the past few years is, you're absolutely right, Mark, that there is East Coast halibut coming in. There's Norwegian halibut coming in. People are still on fresh in November, December. Granted, it's not as much volume. People do go off into frozen, but there's still customers that are asking for fresh if it's available. So I would say for the marketing side, let's give as much time to utilize those catching dates as well as marketing. So that would be my friendly amendment.
John?
So the 10th is friendly, the 30th is not.
Fair.
I'd like to stick with the 10th of November. I'd go to 15th, that would be friendly of November. And if I get
Not
your
friendly
point about
enough.
the 10th of, what's that?
Not friendly enough.
Anyway, the 10th is fine. 10th of March is fine. I think that's a good call.
I'd agree to that as a second.
Okay. For the 10th as a start date. So I'll put forward the start date of the 10th. of March. And we can maybe get that set in stone.
How are the tides at that high?
That,
Don't.
If it's 25th of February, yeah, if you got bad tides, everyone's going to fish in the same spot. So, I mean, 27th is when we come into fish in the worst spot.
So for the US side, the tide book, this is for Sitka district. And, they peak, it's the lower peak, the 6th of March. And they peak again the 21st of March. So by the 10th, and again, this is the lower peak, the low piece of the cycle, by the 10th, they're starting to mitigate quite a bit. The 10th is a Friday, so fishing is starting on a Friday, gives you plenty of chance to get fish to the weekend following. Anyway.
Yeah, if people can use their microphone when they speak, so it's recorded.
You are recording, right?
So Dawn, you had the motion on the table. You amended it to the 10th, but are you keeping the end date the same?
Yes, so the friendly amended motion is now, as far as I know, the March 10th through November 10th. And I said I could leave, friendly wise would be to the 15th. That didn't sound friendly, it was friendly enough. So motion is the 10th to the 10th.
10th to the 10th. Is there a second? Second?
What's already been second?
No.
I got one comment.
Yeah, Tyler.
One thing we've considered in the past is the timing of the Boston Seafood Show, and that is March 12th through 14th, which makes it a pretty goofy time. Opening on the 10th, I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I think on our side, we just have to manage, but just want to make sure everyone's aware of that timing, because quite a bit of people's sales staff is going to be in Boston during that time. So, yep.
John, does that change anything or no?
I completely understand the point. I know that's been an issue in the past. We just got to come up with a date, so.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I think 10th is good. I just want to make sure people are aware of that. Like I said, it's a challenge for us that we would just have to navigate. I don't necessarily like pushing past the 10th too much, and if we do earlier, then we're still going to have to be marketing out during the show. So, but like I said, I just wanted to make sure people are aware of that. Because I don't know if it changed people's minds or not. It sounds like it doesn't, and that's fine by me.
Yes.
Okay. So the original motion from John, March 10th to November 10th. And we've had a second from Dave Brindle. So I'll put it to vote. All in favor? Put your hands up.
My hand's up, Carl.
Yes.
So, so it looks like Bill Sullivan, from Catcher McVeigh, Miles from Bessaker, Tyler, Goodnight, Dave Brental. Yeah, okay. John Woodruff, Mark Callahan, Steve Miner, and Heather, and Carl.
Any no's?
We're not there yet.
And those not in favor?
So,
Nick?
Nick? No?
No. Casey? No. And Bruce?
Bruce, no. Okay. 3 no's. I just didn't mark them yet. Everyone's a yes.
Okay, and then on mine. He hasn't put his hand up or down. I don't think we gave him those instructions yet.
Oh, no.
So it just be just Norman.
It's just
Norman, when we do a vote, if you could put your hand up for agreed, or there's a little agree button and a disagree button, or you can speak up. I would just have to unmute you first.
So Kit voted yes. In favor?
Yes.
And Norm, yes.
Norm is yes. Yes. Perfect.
And then Tim is also yes. He just put it in the chat.
So Tim James is.
Tim James. Got it. Okay.
So the motion does pass.
14 yeses to 3 no's.
14 yeses to 3 no's. And then I'll open up the floor then to Dr. Stewart.
Oh, no, take over. I'll move.
No, I can go to the far end.
No, please.
Hopefully.
Here, have this mic.
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart, for joining us. I'll open up the floor if anyone has any questions for him on the mortality limits. And the TCY.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, John, I'll let you come back to your seat.
Sorry. Thanks, Ian. Hey, several questions. Have you seen the, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's a chart that was developed by the US side last night. It sort of lists the FCEY in each area on the US side. It doesn't list 2A and 2B, but has everything else. Have you seen that? TCEY.
Yeah, I think I have seen several versions of several charts, but
Okay, so what it comes to is, it references, at least it's my understanding, it references the survey last year and the fish that was found in each area last year, and the relative increase or decline in that survey data. And then based on that, it adjusts the TCEY by either the percentage of decline or 15%, by a maximum of 15%. So my question to you first is, so 3A, the decline was, I think, I can't remember, but I did 20 plus, that 27% or 31% is a big number. The change in the TCEY is only 15%. So my question for you is, are you comfortable that that's going to work?
thanks for the question, John. Couple comments. One, I think that that approach is generally a lot like the slow down approach that we had in historical years. And under most circumstances, a slow down approach will work. There are cases where if there's a very steep trend, they won't catch up to it. It'll be going down, and the trend will go down even more, and you'll just chase it down. So I don't know, without testing that as a policy through the MSE, I don't know what its long-term priorities would be. In the short term, I think that approach came out to be something a little less than a status quo, the 38 or 39 million PAB range, depending on what happened in 2A and 2B. And that's going to correspond to a much lower risk than higher TCEYs. It's going to have a appreciably better than 50% chance of no further stock decline. The at the coastwide level, with regard to the regulatory area specific levels, I think the last couple of years have shown us the real challenge in using the annual stock distribution for the upcoming year's mortality limits, because we have the most current information we have was from last summer's survey, and we're projecting that forward into next year for next year's catch limits. And we all saw 2B. We had that huge increase, 3B. We had that huge increase in 3B 2 years ago, and then decrease this year. And I think there was some expectation that some of those fish were going to end up in 3A, but they didn't. And so I wouldn't be too concerned about specific deviations on individual IPHC regulatory areas, just because this is a really good feedback. Just because the distribution itself is changing. And particularly right now with this 2012 year class, these fish seem to be more variable in their distribution than previous year classes at a similar age. Generally, these year classes fill in from the east and west back toward the center of the stock, but we haven't seen as an obvious pattern as that. So the short answer is, I think at the coastwide level, that's a biologically reasonable level of harvest. And I would say our predictability about specifically where those fish are going to be next year is pretty low right now.
Okay, so I understand that. So my question then is, my second question, we talked about I think it's a fishing mortality number, and it's been somewhere between 36 and 42 and 45%. Based on that table, do you know where that puts us if we add in 2A and 2B relative to whatever they were talking about? I mean, what does that end up, do you know where that ends up as fishing mortality?
Not exactly, but it's below the status quo. So it would be in the F51 to 53 range, I believe. It would correspond to a much lower level of fishing intensity than we've been targeting.
Okay, so really that's my question, Ian, is it's less aggressive than what we might otherwise pay.
That's correct.
I have a couple questions about the presentation that Dr. Hicks gave as well. I don't understand the triennial, but I saw him in the room earlier, so maybe he's going to help us and hold it for him.
He'll be back. He's in the conference board and the PAB scheduled simultaneous presentations from both of us. So he went upstairs and I stayed here, but he'll be back as soon as he's done up there.
So the bottom line is, if you look at that table that was generated last night for the U.S. side areas accepting 2A, you're comfortable that that's a reasonable approach to 2023 in terms of harvesting, and that the risk to the resource is a reasonable risk?
I'm just going to look really quickly because I think I can tell you where that's going to land on the decision table.
Because I got to tell you, Ian, you have tremendous credibility, so whatever you say is going to be gold. Not to put any pressure on you.
You're covered.
These numbers right here.
The numbers that you have for charges and periods. Excess wages of 10%.
Yeah, okay. So just verifying it depending on what you do with 2A and 2B, that would be in the range of 38 to 39 million pounds, which on the decision table would put the level of fishing intensity between 51 and 52, F51 and F52. And for context, that would be, sorry, I just want to make sure I give you the right numbers. that would correspond to a lower level of fishing intensity than we estimate for both 2022 and 2021. So there'll be a slight reduction in the overall level of fishing intensity, and pretty consistent, and actually only slightly more aggressive than we had in 22 and 21, and just a little bit more fishing intensity than we had in 2020, which we now estimate at an F54. So it would be essentially keeping the fishing intensity very similar to what we've seen in the last couple of years, which generally, from a biological perspective for halibut, that is a fairly low level of fishing intensity for this life history. The challenge we're in is that we have these low recruitments right now. And so even though it's in general, that's a pretty low level of fishing intensity right now, there is still some chance that it would continue to push the stock down, but certainly much less than the higher.
And based on what we know, fishing at that level will drive us to what percentage? I think it's that's not the virgin biomass, what are the, it's like you get to 30%, you have to start to react, you get to 20%, you have to stop. That keeps us above. There were projections last year that we were going to end up below that 30%, which is sort of an alarm bell. It's at least that. Where do you think this puts us?
With our improved understanding of natural mortality, we're now sitting at 42% of unexploited. So this would have a very low probability of taking us below that 30% reference point, and virtually no probability of going below the 20% range.
And at this point, just one more. There's no indication that there's a very strong year class. I had the graph up, I don't have it up now, but there is some possibility that the 14 or 16 is looking maybe average or better, but otherwise there's nothing in the future that we can see now that looks like it's going to drive this thing upward strong.
That's right. So 2012 looks to be a little bit worse than 2005, but far better than 2006 to 11. 2013, definitely nothing there. And 2014, we're just getting the first hint of it, and it looks like it might be okay. But because it's so young still, at 8 years old in the most recent data, it's really too early to say. There's also some promising signs in the trawl surveys, both in the Gulf and the Bering Sea, but we've had previous cases where things looked good in the trawl surveys and didn't pan out. So it would be too early to say much there. But not bad news in those series, just too early to say for sure.
Anyone else? I'll go, sorry. Heather first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ian, let's go back to the 15% maximum change. You said that you thought that would need to go through the MSE process. I might be wrong, but we were told, I think, when we discussed this, that it had gone through the MSE process, and that the 15% maximum change year to year was something that they recommended, but that was on a coast-wide basis rather than on an area basis. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the initial testing of that constraint was only done at the coast-wide level. And so at some point it's turned into an area-specific constraint, and that's not something that's been tested yet. In terms of the coast-wide stock, we wouldn't expect that having that constraint would cause more problem than we saw from the coast-wide constraint, but it might be something that we want to look at the distribution of biomass, because we might see combinations of conditions where the biomass might be lower, particularly in one or more biological regions. That's why I think we would want to test it in the MSC first.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead.
So the really large changes in the FIS in Area 3A and 4A, I think are alarming to me, and I think that that's why people on the U.S. side anyway have been talking about limiting that change downward to 35% instead of 37% or 26%. So do you see that as you had mentioned that the distribution is less predictable now, and that might explain these really large changes in the FIS. Can you help us understand that a little bit more, so that people maybe don't see it as too alarming in these different areas?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I can speak to that. So there's two components here. One is how much of that may or may not be observation variability in the survey. I mean, we know sometimes the survey is a little bit high or a little bit low. I would say that in that regard, the data that we got in 2022 was quite clear across 3A that, for example, that there was a big decrease. And I don't think that what we observed in the survey index is representative of just a high or low point. I think that's a real signal. We saw the same pattern in the fishery that we saw in the survey. It seems to be a real signal indicating that for whatever reason, the distribution of fish in 2022, particularly this 2012 year class, was not distributed strongly in 3A. So I think that's a real signal. But the challenge we have in terms of turning that into mortality limits for the upcoming year is that those fish have now had a whole nother year to potentially move again. And so I think we've seen this recurring where the decisions react to the previous year's survey, and then we may still get a surprise in the distribution of the upcoming year. So I honestly, I don't know that there's any way to quantify whether the amount of risk associated, particularly for 3A or 4A, where we saw those declines, whether that's likely to continue into the coming year. Years ago, we would have seen it was a little bit more stable. We would have had more confidence in that. But I think we are seeing a bit more variability in the last couple of years as we've transitioned to these younger fish.
Thank you.
I'll go Tyler and then I'll go Norm.
Yeah, so using that SPR 43 as a reference point, we watched it go up pretty big this year, over 10 million. And I know, as you spoke to, a big part of that was the change in mortality assumptions on one of your 4 models. I'm just wondering how much of the change was that responsible for? And I guess maybe a simpler question is, do we know what SPR 43 would be if we didn't change that assumption?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I don't know exactly because we have there are other changes and then we added all the new data as well. So I don't have a good estimate to tell you exactly what that offset is. We have, because the 2012 year class is approaching maturity, we did see one metric that's not so related to the change in mortality is the 3-year surplus production. And so that surplus has gone up from a little bit under 40 million pounds to 43 million pounds this year. And that's more reflective of just the year classes in the stock. So I think that the F43 calculation would have gone up from 41.2 last year to something higher, perhaps on the order of that change that we saw in the 3-year surplus of roughly 4 million pounds. And likely the difference is the change in mortality. That's as an approximation, because I think that's a reasonable way to get it.
Can I actually just add to Tyler's question? With that change in the mortality sort of model, does that concern you? Because now technically the biomass is bigger, and then the survey data and then what the guys out on the ground saw this year was a lot worse. Does it make it worse potentially?
Yeah, sorry, I kind of have to turn away when I'm talking.
Sorry.
It does mean that where we thought the stock was supporting a certain level of fishing intensity in the last few years, now it turns out that we were actually fishing at a little less than we thought, and yet we still saw the same trends. So I think it really does underscore the effect on productivity of these recent recruits. So yeah, it is bad news in a way. It's good news in the long run in terms of the productivity of the stock, but it's reflective of even poorer recent conditions than we thought.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Norm.
Yes, thank you. Ian, can you hear me all right? This is Norm Pillen, Seafood Producers Co-op.
Yes, you can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that I'm sort of covering the same ground that John and Heather both did, but maybe say it in a different way. That we have some numbers that were put out by the conference board yesterday, that I know that you've reviewed these numbers. So looking at those and looking at total mortality last year was roughly 39 million pounds. And the number that the conference board is recommending is virtually the same. And my concern, and what I'd like to hear from you, is that enough given the FIS results and what you've shown us for concern in the stock assessment? Is fishing at the same level as what the total mortality was last year? Is that comfortable for you?
Well, I'm not making the decision, but I will say that it's that staying at the same TCEY actually corresponds to a slightly lower risk this year than last year, just because we're one more year down the road on the 2012 year class. I think last year only approximately 19% of those fish were mature, and now we're about a third of them are estimated to be mature. So we are, essentially, we are one step closer to getting across this ditch of poor recruitment that we've been working through for the last several years. So in that regard, holding steady at where we are is a slightly better situation than we were in last year, even despite the changes in our understanding of the stock.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Kit had a question he typed in here. What is behind the sharp increase in non-directed fishing mortality from 2021 to 2022? Is that a user group or natural?
That is a good question, and I think you should ask the U.S. delegation to speak to that. We get the estimates of non-directed. This is non-directed bycatch and not directed.
Non-directed, correct?
Yeah. So I think somebody from the NIPS team here would be better able to speak to that. I know that there are several of the flatfish fisheries, particularly in the Gulf of Alaska, have had reduced markets and reduced participation for the last couple of years. But I don't know if that continued into 2022 or whether that's perhaps a turnaround in some of those fisheries has led to higher halibut encounters. Optimistically, it could also be an increase in halibut encounters or encounter rate, but I don't know. It would be better to ask them.
Okay. John?
Hey, the one thing this came up in the discussion that Dr. Hicks was having relative to global warming. I was thinking about, I think what halibut do when they spawn, those larvae or juveniles wind up on the surface, right? And they on the surface and they go to the beach and then they start to drop down into the water column. Is that?
They don't utilize the surface waters as much as most of the other groundfish species. They're actually deeper.
Okay.
The eggs do float, so they spawn in deep water, and the eggs do float, but they don't spend much time right at the surface. In fact, that poses a problem for our sampling because most of the plankton sampling that goes on is surface sampling, and they catch very few halibut. So we actually know less about halibut distribution in the plankton stage than a lot of the other groundfish because they're not as effectively sampled. But then they spend 6 months as eggs and larvae before they settle out into the near shore sandy areas.
And I think Alan was talking about, I thought he said that maybe temperatures on the surface had changed some, but temperatures below maybe had not. Did I get that wrong? Or have temperatures, say, on the seafloor were ultimately the same as well? I mean, are we seeing that those temperatures are changing?
We're seeing some response in both places. It seems to be a delayed response. For example, the really warm surface water we had in 2014 lasted for a year or two and then mostly dissipated on the surface, but that warm water slid down the shelf and was still measurable even into 2016 and early 2017 on a variety of different surveys, ours included. So we're seeing some changes both at the surface and in the deeper waters. The surface temperatures get a lot of press because that's the easiest thing to measure. People can look from a satellite and tell you roughly what the surface temperature is. But I think the ones that matter are actually the bottom temperatures.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Yes.
If I may,
Yes.
can I suggest we take a short break? I think they're gonna try and fix the mic setup for us. So before we move on, and Alan's not here yet, so I think.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Test of the microphones. Test. Can anybody online hear?
I hear you.
Testing for feedback.
I can hear you.
Testing for feedback.
Test, test, test.
Testing for feedback. 1 2 1 2. No. Test. 1 2 1 2. 1 2. No feedback.
Yes, yes, can hear you.
Testing for feedback in the room. Testing for feedback in the room. Testing. Test. That's really loud. Test, 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 test. Testing. Test, test. Test, test. Test, test. Test, test.
From his presentation upstairs. And I was just told that Dave is not available today, so we'll see him tomorrow morning. And as we wait for Dr. Hicks, I know mortality limits could be a little sticky right now. Do we just want to move to the industry proposals just so we can bang those out a little quicker? Okay. If the secretary could please pull up just some regulatory proposals.
I think I saw mine.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we're just going to pull up the what's it? One, mortality and fishing limits, section 5. It is available on the PAB sort of homepage, a link to all of these. Make for me to read them out or just to everyone. Prop A1.
I think that's a chat, right?
No. Does it have anything to click? No? Okay. Okay. Regard. Yes.
I do believe this is just the motion put forward to the mortality limits, right? Or not? Or what is the one prop? I believe this regularly.
Yeah, John.
Can you help me again where to be?
So on the, do you have the PAB homepage up?
Help me here.
This is just basically saying to this.
Yeah, got it.
So on the homepage under fishery regulation proposals for 2023, all the documents are. So you click on the PDF link right there and it will take you right to the proposal. Jessie. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Before I speak, there's still some technical issues going, at least for the online folks. It's I'm getting about every other word when you talk, or when anybody says anything. So I'm not quite sure what's going on, but it's pretty challenging to have a conversation. I don't know if you're hearing me well or not.
Loud and clear.
Okay, I'm just curious. It seems like this is just asking for approval to adopt the format that we used to use. Is that correct?
Yes.
Then I would make a motion to approve the format.
Second.
Can open for if there, or we can just go to vote.
So this is just the format. Didn't we just have or we?
Yeah, the formatting issue on this
Okay.
proposal. We're not putting any hard numbers in this part.
Voting on then.
To adopt the proposal or to recommend the adoption of the proposal. Correct.
Okay. That seems a little less contentious.
Yes. So the appendix, page 3-4. Okay, now that there's a motion and a second, I'll vote. Does anyone not recommend putting this proposal through? Unanimous. Yeah, and Alan is here to speak to us, so we'll just put proposals on pause and open up the floor for a discussion.
Hello. Sorry, just came out of the CB. They grilled me a little bit there.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Hicks.
No worries. Thanks for your patience. And if you do need to work on something else right now, okay. Unless you had something?
No, please go ahead.
So yeah, I think most of you saw the presentation I gave this morning. It should be fresh in your mind, so I won't present anything here. Just a reminder, I'll walk through the priority objectives that the commission defines, and also walk through two different management procedures, different management procedure limits and maybe up a little bit. The size limits, we saw an increase in yield when with your assessments, it linked the FIS results to changes in the TC in years that you did not do assessment performed well, and there was a in of year when you took approach. So doing year just in between. And And questions?
I'll go first, Heather.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You, the recommended the annual, is that the
I have to look at the report, but I don't think clear patients on support the management procedures.
Okay.
But through the objective support triennial one, the commission's priority objectives support triennial management procedure as the best performing.
Okay. Do you anticipate the others will discuss vote? I haven't looked at it.
That's the question. If they have a specific time, I see them do that. And definitely discuss how cost benefits of this that they have been having. If I was to be a fortune teller, a special session, which they have done in past years to make these types of decisions.
Okay. I was asking, I specifically on our agenda, but maybe one of the other that I haven't seen it. So if we are going to have that discussion, perhaps we should have a discussion about that's and to the other business less on the agenda. I can't see. Okay.
the analysis that, and I don't know if it's an, but more, that it was to because I mean that assumes, I believe, that you're not going to 20 back. And the fish has to get certain size before it's going to be, and but what happens when for a 6 halibut or an 8-pound halibut drops from $6 to $4, because on a 6-pounder we have, but get on a, it's and the and the price that fish is going to be less, and yeah.
It's a legitimate question, a very good question, and one we actually thought about, and we did some with we larger fish. Okay. They're going to go out there and use only big hook. What this activity, and then to the other side, we change selectivity. Just quick home. And found that those still had the benefits of but they when you were eating fish, the benefit was less. You're not accessing small to make even don't because if you try to catch more small fish, you have a great but more fish fish, and that's yeah, we that's definitely that. The other thing to think about related to the value and the fish with total increase in yield, we could still be equal to even the about price. It's but you have an yield that there could be a less to such the same.
They come home value because fish as much because and 2,000 pounds of it is worth $1 or $2 less. It doesn't.
If you remove the size limit, they would have 12,000 or 13,000 pounds, but they would bring in 9,000 pounds of to 4 pounds. They would pay the 30 above. But I distracted you from the first part of it, and I think what fish has that is can these hard sizes and yeah, the still.
Thank
you.
Bruce.
Yeah, I've some fish in these we do we fish and we see how many little ones there are, and there's huge value, and we have some concerns about that.
Jessie.
Heather question agenda. But it did seem like a big topic for the commissioners as well. And I'm not asking you to tell the future, but do you think this is something they may be voting on this year or next year? Is this, or is this still more of just a discussion and more? Yeah.
Yeah, it is trying to tell the future a little bit. I wish I could. The limit, it's every third year we do another size limit now. Just what, and it's been going on since 1954 or something like that. But it has changed a few times. Then, I'm not sure. I think it would be it's this. The year they could consider that as well. See it on the agenda. However, the commission has really been talking to me about and the commission did board making and every to this to make a decision. I would like them to see them that at and make those decisions. So it probably be a way.
I appreciate that.
Mark.
I was just like, I was a little confused that lower, so 30, 26, whatever. If he had 10 at he'd have 12,000. What? That's I'm confused by.
So,
I mean, IFQ is an IFQ. Depends.
So the way that works is the coast-wide TCY would increase by 3.7% without a size limit. So if the coast-wide TCY is 40 million pounds with a size limit, if the commission said next year we're removing that size limit, the coast-wide TCY would then be 40 or 48 million pounds or whatever, or 3% higher. And then that coast-wide TCY then gets allocated to all the areas and the IFQ holders. So that IFQ holder that got 10,000 pounds with a 40 million pound coast-wide TCY would say get 13,000 pounds with a 48 million pound coast-wide TCY. So it's increasing the overall yield by removing the size limit, because now you're accessing smaller fish, you're accessing more males because the size limit's gone. Thus, the yield would increase. Dr. Stewart showed this as well. Even he put it into the assessment 3 years ago and said, if we did not have a size limit, what would the yield advice be? And it was about actually 8% higher at that time. And so it's just a matter of yield for everybody would increase. They could make a higher mortality limit decision that trickles down to the IFQ holder. Instead of 10,000 pounds, they now have 13,000 pounds. But they're going to bring in a lot more small fish. And so they're, instead of 10,000 pounds of O32 fish with a size limit, without a size limit, they'll bring in 9,000 pounds of O32 and 4,000 pounds of U32.
So is it an economic versus a biological question as far as the IFQ holder goes?
I think it's largely an economic question. And that's why I presented that statistic, which I called EVPR, equal value price ratio. So what does the price of a U32 fish compared to an O32 fish have to be? And it was about 50% less. If a U32 fish was about 50% less, then that IFQ holder would bring home the same amount of dollars with or without the size limit. If the U32 price is greater than 50%, they would have an economic gain. And that's 50% on average. It was quite variable.
I'm sure they have, but have they looked at the market and said, what are we going to do with very, very small fish? When there's so much other stuff with turbot, for instance, people will go to turbot, which are substantially, by geometric terms, cheaper than halibut would be. That's just kind of interesting.
And that's the unknown, is what will the price be? So we've been selling U32 fish on the FIS in the last 4 years. And that price, the price they've given for U32 fish from the FIS catch has been about 80% the price of O32 fish.
Is there any idea how big a 26 would be, the size of the fish? Because for years, I've explained to customers, we went 10, 20, 20.
How many pounds?
But
Yeah.
it's the length, not the poundage. I have it just the spiel that you give the customers. Gosh darn it, I won't say that much. This is not a 10, 20 fish.
Yeah.
But the legality, so you have to explain the whole thing.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
And I can't remember exactly how many pounds a 26-inch fish was. Length, weight. I figured it out a few months ago.
Because at 32, we had 7, 8 pound fish.
Yep. Yeah. So it would probably, I think it was like 5 to 7 or something. If I remember right, I can figure it out again.
I would just be curious to see what the average, if there is such a information.
We have length weight tables on the IPHC website that you can then do the conversion.
John.
So Mark, I'll bet your buyers didn't say, gosh darn it.
Well, that's right. I was trying to clean it up.
So Alan, 3.7% is, I think, what you said. That would be the increase in yield. So if I have 10,000 pounds, that's 370 pounds of additional, maybe I'm not doing them. Yeah, that's 370 pounds of additional fish. So I thought the pickup was that you could fish quicker because you're going to catch these small fish, then you're not going to let them go. So your IFQ poundage would increase more quickly. You'd have a shorter trip because you're keeping these smaller fish, and that's where the savings would be. But my sense is, and I understand that on the survey you're getting 80% for those smaller ones. Is it the survey keep everything, even the under 26?
Yes, they are keeping even under 26, as far as I know it. They aren't keeping everything they catch. They still are releasing some U32s, but the ones they have to sample for an otolith and do have to kill, they will keep, and those include under 26. And I apologize for my really bad math.
Yeah. 80%. I mean, an 80% price on a under 32, especially an under 26, seems like a good number. That's a lot higher than I would have guessed. Anyway, I just, I'm struggling with this math. So if I'm a harvester and I've got a limited number, if I got 10,000 pounds IFQs, I sure as hell don't want any of them to be worth $2 less.
And how do you avoid high grade?
There's you have to raise your hand. There's like 3 other people that are trying to ask.
I'll go Dave and then Nick, and then it can go back to Mark.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I was one of those processors who bought a lot of that survey fish. In fact, we did pay about 80%, but it was such an insignificant amount of fish, it just more or less got blended in. If we were to start buying boatloads of fish that were U32s, there'd be a whole separate size grade for that and price. No, it's Dana Besker Company. We just followed.
I'd echo Dave. I think it's good.
Nick?
Yeah, just that was exactly going to be my point. Like when we were bidding on that fish, usually you just use the guy who won the bid before, and you go, oh, that's what he paid. So like I got to pay 5 cents more or whatever. And we would just amortize it in the cost of the other bid, right? And then you have like 400 or 500 pounds and nobody wanted it. And then you're like, what are you going to do? And I remember one of our customers caught one of the small fish by accident in their 1020s and screamed bloody murder, right? And yeah, using 80% value is like, I would think it would be, you're competing with turbot, you're competing with petroli sole, you're competing with other things. It's going to be way, 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 way less than that, especially if we're getting substantial volume of that fish. Just completely unmarketable.
Can I respond?
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, and that's why we use the 80% as the example of what's been paid off the fish, which is obviously a very small amount of U32 fish on the market. If it gets flooded, that's a different story. But what in the analysis that we did, we looked at what would the price ratio have to be, and that's where we found for the total fishery summed all together to have an equal value with and without a size limit, those U32 fish would have to be on average 50% the price of a O32 fish. But it varies over time because we have such a large influx of this small fish with the 2012 year class that it could be probably as low as 20 or 30% in the next couple of years. But that's going to die out as those grow older and there's fewer small fish to supplement the yield from a fishery. So it's a pretty interesting analysis. But on average, it was about 50% would be equal value. And so it's a trade-off in terms of economics in that sense.
I'll just sort of not necessarily a question, but just a comment. I've followed the Russian fishery for a number of years, and they had no size limit, and they took out what they could take out, and now they're struggling to catch fish, and they're having to go up further and further into the Bering Sea, higher up, in order to catch any sort of stock. And typically in the grounds where they fished before, there's no halibut there. So just food for thought.
If I may comment on that, that was part of doing the study with the MSE. Was the commission asked, we'd always done size limit studies on what happens right now if we did this right now. And the commission asked, well, what are the long-term effects of continually fishing these smaller fish? And these results support sustainability, even without the size limit. Over the long term. And that's because we have a well-managed fishery, a pretty low fishing intensity, 20 control rule. We have all these checks and stops in there that would hopefully not allow us to bring it down to small levels.
Jessie and then Norm.
Yeah. Let Norm go first.
Norm, go ahead.
Okay, just want to go on record speaking that I oppose this concept as well. This fish will have greatly reduced value for us, competing against other flatfish of considerably less value in the market. And I'm not a big fan of reducing the juvenile stock. So I just want to kind of reiterate what I'm hearing around the table, that I'd be opposed to this. Thanks.
Jessie.
I suppose I just echo the room and also say I think we would benefit from actually seeing what those prices are, because 50%, we don't know if we're competing with turbot or what that price might actually be if we're seeing thousands of pounds into the market. I know John had a question too.
Go ahead, John.
Well, I think to your point, Jessie, you could just get I think you ultimately get a recovery from a 6-pound halibut and see what that is. And that's what's going to drive your price, I think. And my guess is if it's 48% for a 12-pounder, it's going to be something like 42% for then the fillet itself is going to be quite different, much thinner, longer, skinnier, etc. So having said that, I had a question and now I've forgotten it. I know what the question was. Dr. Hicks, I thought you said that the commissioners are going to take this issue up. There's a serious discussion going on with the commissioners that this could be something we see going forward in 2024, 23. Are they thinking we're going to try this?
I'm not sure where they are sitting on this. I think the process, if they were interested in removing the size limit, I don't know that could take place in 2020. It would have to pass through regulation, but I'm not sure where they're sitting on it.
Could they do something like try it in a area? I guess that'd be, well, no, because they're keeping it separate. Your quota share, at least on the U.S. side, your quota share is by area. So when you deliver that fish, it's from 3B or 2C or wherever, but it's from that area. I wonder if they would consider trying it just in one area.
That was actually the recommendation of the SRB about 2 years ago, I think. The SRB suggested, because the uncertainty was the price, and the SRB suggested maybe you open this up in one area that might benefit most from removing the size limit to get an idea of what prices might look like. Is there a market or not even? And that was a suggestion.
And you'd also want to make sure that that you somehow you didn't have a bunch of high grading.
Because as soon as people figured out that, you know, a 6-pounder or an 8-pounder is only worth, we're buying 8-pounders now, but a 6-pounder is only worth 60% of their fish. I mean, they're going to react to that.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely a concern to think about. Right now, they're already releasing the fish. We know they're releasing fish, so we estimate the discard mortality, but we don't really, I mean, we have a pretty good handle on that. Removal of the size limit with perfect monitoring would remove that uncertainty, but then if you throw back in high grading, it adds that uncertainty again.
Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
Dr. Hicks, do we have the most recent information on 10, 20 fish or under 20-pound fish or under 32 or 32? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's been as high as 72% of under 20-pound fish before. Do you have the most recent breakdown of fish?
In
Size limit?
terms of the landings?
Yes.
Yeah, we convert it to, I don't know what it is by size or pounds, but we do it by age because that's how we enter it into the stock assessment. Okay. And what Dr. Stewart presented was where the fishery is really switching right now from those older fish to now it's starting to dig in a lot into the 2012 year class. So it's switching to smaller fish. So I think we did hear reports of a lot smaller size categories coming across the docks this last year.
Yeah, I can tell you that we have that data based on size because of the price. Yeah. So in 3A, I can't remember exactly what it was for this past summer or past year, but it's something like 80%. And in 2C, it's more like 35%. And in 3B, I don't know what it was last year, but I know that a few years ago it was almost 100%. Anyway.
And I expect in the upcoming years, with the 2012 year class taking over more and more of the fishery, that you'll see higher percentages of probably smaller fish classes.
Apologies. I was able to get Dr. Hicks' presentation up on the screen. I believe this is what we were talking about and what's recommended to the commissioners. So if people, it helped me understand what we were talking about a little bit more. Also helpful in these slides or the slide that talks about what the percent that needs to get paid in terms anyway. So, Heather.
This is the recommendation from the MSAB?
From just the Secretary of Staff presentation, okay. Not from the MSAB.
Okay.
Yes. Thanks for clarification.
Less
Any other questions, comments for Dr. Hicks? Yes.
I just want to make one, the last one there, C, where the objectives, I think that's where the PAB might be able to play a role in, what are the important objectives for the PAB in relation to a size limit. And there, as you saw, there's a very few metrics that the commission considered in this presentation. Are there other metrics such as the value of the fishery, such as the amount of high grading, such as anything related to you that's of importance to you in terms of the halibut fishery?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So while this is fresh in our memory, does the group want to sort of put forward a recommendation for the commissioners based on this? and particularly this slide. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Norm.
Yeah, real quick, just thinking about something. If we went with this and went to no size limit, it could mean that some fishermen might change their gear type to catch more of these fish, to catch smaller fish, which would, at some point they're going to be small enough that they're not going to want to bother with. And in my mind, thinking smaller fish more susceptible to mortality and being released, that they're more easily damaged as in the process of being released, that it may increase mortality. So that's something to think about too. If people start actually targeting under 32, don't know what the reality of that is with a lower price, but if they're having a hard time catching bigger fish, it might be a real consideration, and that could increase your mortality on those baby fish. So just something to think about.
Norm, thank you, Norm. John.
So I think as the PAB, we should make some call to the commissioners. This should be part of our minutes. And I'm pretty sure that tomorrow morning, Heather will have a recommendation for us. As a motion, sort of.
Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, I think there's some facts that they're using, Dr. Hicks was using in this discussion, such as the market value of this fish, that's really inaccurate, right? I mean, I think we're hearing that, the bids for the fish, we've had problems where they bid 1 penny for the true cod, right? I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that goes on in that bidding process. And, the only thing that stopped high grading of black cod in BC was monitoring, right? So fishermen are going to throw back low value fish and keep high value fish. And without monitoring, nothing's going to stop that. So I think I understand the implications for the TAC, but there's a lot of pretty serious issues that don't come up in some of that FIS data that Dr. Hicks is using to make these recommendations, I believe.
Steve?
Yeah, I've had some experience as well in dealing with survey fish and trying to take it to market. And I'm troubled by 2 things. One is the market assumptions. Even at 50%, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable that that's where the floor is. But also, I haven't heard any discussion about how this changes fleet behavior and fishing behavior, and it will significantly change fishing behavior. And without a more thorough discussion with that, I just couldn't get on board.
Okay, thank you. So how should we structure this sort of recommendation? Heather?
Well, you have it on the agenda for under other issues,
Okay.
which is going to be tomorrow probably.
Yeah.
So why don't, some people get together and come
Marinate
up
on
with,
this.
a recommendation.
Okay.
It would be really nice to know before then what the commissioners intend to do. I don't know whether, I just looked at their agenda. It's not specifically on their agenda.
Right.
So, and there's a commissioner in the room. I don't know, don't want to put him on the spot, but is there someone who can find that out between now and tomorrow, whether this is going to be something that the commissioners are going to discuss and act on?
Sorry, Peter, not to put you on the spot around the corner there. Do you know, is this something that you will discuss at least? Okay. Okay. John.
So I suggest, as Heather did, some people can get together and just come up with a motion that would suffice to express our concern.
Okay,
And,
great.
and so we'll have something for the group tomorrow.
Okay, we'll table this to tomorrow morning. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So I guess we'll jump quickly back to the regulatory proposals just so we can hopefully get that out of the way. Okay, so Prop A1's finished, so we'll just jump into Prop A2.
Could I ask a question? I'm sorry.
Yes, Peggy.
So forgive me for interrupting, but are we? I'm not hearing very well, so those already been addressed.
I think he did. Yeah.
I think this might be something that perhaps you have an opinion on.
Heather.
Just a question, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think that the conference board, I'm getting a running, commentary from the conference board. They addressed the recommendations regarding the MSAB duration, meeting times, membership and all of that. I don't know whether the PAB wants to do that. Is that your question, Peggy? Is that what you're referring to?
No.
No,
although I
what are you
think that
referring
is a
to?
Good question. My question was on the recommendations provided to the commissioners from the staff. It's just, yeah, you got it up there. Thank you.
There, okay.
Slide 26 and 27 on paper AM099-13.
Dr. Hicks, if you could just speak maybe to these slide 26 and the slide after.
Sure. Sorry about that. I jumped the gun there. Yeah, so these performance metrics are all linked to those objectives that are actually on the previous slide there. So the commissioners decided on priority objectives to narrow down the number of objectives, make decision-making a little bit more clear. And to see if those objectives are met by these different management procedures, we report different metrics. And so we're just asking the commissioners to endorse these following performance metrics as they are linked to the objectives. And that is, the probability of falling below 20% spawning biomass. That would be bad. So we don't want to do that. The probability of being below 36%, which is defined as a target biomass right now. We want to remain at or above that, as I suggested in the slides. And then C is just the median TCY. That's a measure of the directed fishing mortality, or I'm sorry, the overall fishing mortality limit. And then the last one, the median AAV, is the average annual variability in the TCY. How much on average does that TCY change from year to year? And so we saw some of the slides had like 17% change on average. And so these are just the metrics which then you evaluate the management procedures on to find the best performing management procedure. And they're linked specifically to the objectives. point earlier was there might be other metrics that are important to stakeholders. For example, somebody else might be interested in discard mortality or efficiency, catch rates, or something like that. So, but these are the main priority metrics that we're asking the commission to endorse.
John?
So when you say management procedures, I'm just trying to get my mind around, these are recommendations for performance metrics. And I get the 20% because that's been out there for a while, and there was a 30% number. And the 36% is less than the spawning bio. That's okay. So the spawning biomass target is 36%. Okay. This is slowly coming back to me. So the ask is, or what the PAB should be doing is looking at these recommendations and saying, hey, we agree with this. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, hey, what most people really care about is what's the quota. So
that would come in C, on
okay.
C there. Yeah.
So these get us, but these are the limitations. That is 20%, 30%, 36%. Those are the limitations that sort of how we adjust the potential quota.
They are, well, the 20% is a threshold that you just don't want to fish so hard or be so, well, you just don't want the stock to go below that level because it might not return from that level. It's a very low amount. So we just want to avoid that, make sure we don't have high fishing intensity or some management procedure that causes adverse risk to the stock. The 36% is, in theory, from the mathematical models, if we kept the spawning biomass at 36%, that would maximize long-term sustainable yields. And so that's a proxy for MSY, like they use in the Magnuson-Stevens Act, and they talk about targets in the Canadian Fisheries Act. And so that's where 36. We actually want to keep it around 36 for optimal performance and long-term. But then we have maximizing directed fishing yield, and then the variability from year to year. Those are objectives as well that we might want to consider.
So I get the variability. And it seems like the 36%, you'd actually want to, if we were above that, it would be a good thing. I'm just trying to relate this. I'm just trying to understand how this, again, what's the quota? That's what everybody wants to know, and by area. And so it'd be easy enough to say, oh yeah, let's recommend that. But trying to understand how this impacts what's the quota. I get that the median TCEY, okay, I got that part. I got the average part. I think I got the rest. I'm still struggling to kind of put it all together and say, yeah, okay, I get it. We should do this.
And so you said, what's the quota in your area? And that's one thing that is not here, area specific TCEY. The MSAB has considered it. In fact, the MSAB is, we worked with the MSAB to come up with all these objectives and metrics. Adam Kaiser mentioned in his presentation, the MSAB was interested in regulatory area specific results. And these are all coast-wide metrics. So I did not present the regulatory area specific metrics at this meeting. They are available on the MSC Explorer.
And Alan, I said, yeah, my area, because that's what fishermen are going to be focused on. Realistically, I mean, I think looking at the TCEY for the entire area, for the entire Gulf, if you will, for the entire regulatory areas you can adjust those based on the survey data. And that's kind of what the group did last night, year to year. So I'm good with all that. The issue is just, how do you make sure, I know you know, I say it anyway,
How do you make sure, given all the information you've got, that you don't get close to 20% and you stay somewhere around this 36% or better? And I think that's what this whole process is about. And if these recommendations get us there, then let's do it. I guess that's my.
Yes. So these are just the metrics that would then be used to determine a management procedure. Like, let's say we had a management procedure, let's fish really lightly or let's fish really, really hard. And what these metrics might show is the probability of falling below 20% is really high when you fish really hard and really low when you fish really lightly. And so that's where these metrics come into play. It's just endorsing them as a way to evaluate the management procedures we're looking at. So as a way to evaluate size limit or no size limit, for example.
Okay, I think that, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Dr. Hicks.
Did you want to look at the next slide?
Oh yeah, sorry, next slide.
So yeah, this slide is simply to focus the commission on to the 5 management procedures that are under consideration. So it says to just note the following management procedures. This is the focusing it down on 5 management procedures for consideration by the commission in their decision-making process this year. And so we have at the top MPA 32. What that means is MP is management procedure, A means annual assessment, and 32 is a 32-inch size limit. So that would basically be like status quo, an annual assessment, 32-inch size limit. We go down, you see there's 2 other size limits, 26-inch size limit, a 0-inch size limit, no size limit. And then D and E are actually a biennial assessment with this empirical rule using FIS data. And then E is the triennial assessment using the FIS data as an empirical rule as well. Both of those with the 32-inch size limit. So those are the management procedures on the table for them to evaluate and make decisions on. And so all that we're doing is asking them to note these are what's presented. And then the next recommendations 5, 6, and 7 in this presentation are all related to 5 is size limit conclusions. 6 is the multi-year assessment conclusions. And then recommendation 7 after that is simply we're looking for direction to then start updating our IPHC harvest strategy policy. And I note I have a summary table and a summary plots just before these recommendations, and those are for these 5 management procedures. So these are the options for the decision points.
John?
Well, so again, just trying to understand what's being asked here. This is MSAB stuff. They are pushing this forward as their recommendation. And I think the PAB is being asked for its opinion. And having sat on the MSAB and being completely outclassed, I'd say they know what they're doing. I mean, I think that I don't know why we wouldn't push this forward. This 27, they're the 3 options for size limit. We're going to make a comment about size limit. I think we can make a comment about any of this other stuff, but I see no reason. I mean, I haven't seen a reason not to push the MSAB recommendations forward.
Nick?
Yeah, I'll admit this is a little bit over my head on a few of these options, but if we've already established that we have some serious concerns about having an under 32 size limit, why would we agree to have an annual assessment for a 0 size, no size limit, an under 32 size limit? It just seems like it's creating extra work and cost at the commission level to keep evaluating these when it's not something that the market or the processors and probably the fishermen really want at all, right? So it seems to me like we should just focus on the U32 and then maybe have a triannual on the U30, or sorry, on the, keep the annual assessments on the O32 and then maybe a triannual on the U32 to manage resources accordingly, right?
Bruce?
I kind of agree with Nick, and just another point to John's thing. I don't agree to just roll over to science. I mean, they are asking us for our recommendations as processors, and we're recommending to close our plants in the fall and not buy fish, even though there's no conservation reason to do that. So we do have an opinion that affects the policies that we put out of here. I agree on the size limit thing. You know, having done a lot of the fish charters and charter work, I think that when we go to areas, there could be a threshold where if the catch rates, the CPUE is very, very low, maybe you don't have to go back you could go back every third year. And some of the areas where the fluctuations are higher and the stocks are higher, maybe you go back every second year or every year. And there could be some thresholds that trigger more sampling in those areas and less samplings, like out west where it hasn't changed much for 5 years, and there'd be cost savings for the program. You know, the economics of this thing has to make sense too. So I don't think we're entirely in the hands of the scientists, and even though we agree with their methodology, right? So that's what our input needs to be. And thank you.
Jessie?
I apologize, but just to clarify, Dr. Hicks, is it A or B or C that you're asking them to make a decision on, or all? I heard you say this is status quo. These are already things that we're doing annual assessments of. I guess I was confused there. I apologize.
Yeah, thanks, Jessie, and thanks for letting me step in here real quick. There's two axes of decision here. There's an axis of decision that is size limits, and that's A, B, or C. And then there's an axis of decision, which is multi-year assessment, and that's A, D, or E. So if you split them out that way, if you look at the table on a previous slide, it has status quo down the middle. You make a decision going left, and you make a decision going right. You can start crossing it and say triennial with no size limit. We didn't do that run, but you can make that inference. The key here is all of this has been done. Work is all done. It's been presented to the commission. Using the metrics on the previous slide, then as an evaluation tool, then leads to 5, 6, and 7. So if you go to the next slide, you will see these are now recommendations on the size limits, A, B, or C, and we're recommending, the Secretary of Staff actually recommends choosing C, no size limit, based on those objectives the commission has defined. If you go to the next slide, 6 is to endorse the triennial assessment, making the choice on E, making that decision. And so if you actually combine 5 and 6, that's not an option specifically run. It's without a size limit triennial assessment, but we still have an idea of the outputs there. And I think this is where the PAB, the CB stakeholders can come in and say, the metrics that you're considering, those are good metrics. We have an additional metric that we are considering. That's the price of the U32 fish is going to be 20% of the O32. We can't market them, blah, blah. And those are the additional considerations that the commission can then consider in their discussions and their decision-making process.
Yeah.
Carl. I do believe as a group, we have both of those items to discuss in other business tomorrow to address both of those items specifically. I needed that clarification, so just so everybody else can kind of be on the same page.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Hicks. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So are we going to come back to it tomorrow with sort of get our heads around it?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I think that's probably wise, because I think we'd probably have to formulate some motions. It's getting kind of late today.
Yep.
We may need some time
Absolutely.
to do that.
Okay.
On those 2 decision points, that's what I got out of the discussion. There's 2 decision points, and we need to let them know. I guess I have a more general question, and that is, why didn't this appear on our agenda? I mean, I don't get that. If we are expected to have a recommendation, that should have been made clear. I mean, I'm not being critical. I'm just wondering whether they really want our recommendation or whether it's being put off to a different meeting. I'm hearing that the conference board made a motion to have a work session with commissioners and industry on these topics and perhaps others. So it does sound as though, like Commissioner DeGreef said, that it might be passing it forward into a special meeting of some kind, in which case this might be the only opportunity for the PAB to make a formal recommendation on these things. Any other information on that would be helpful.
And I know after Dr. Hicks's presentation yesterday, the other Canadian Commissioner, Neil Davies, asked specifically for input from the 2 groups.
Okay, I missed that.
Yeah. So tabling that, we still have a little bit of time that maybe, hopefully we can get a couple more of these propositions put to bed.
If I may.
Yes, Jessie.
I believe we're on A2, and A2 is similar to the last regulatory proposal. It just talks about season dates, which we've already voted on. So this is just the verbiage. This is just the same language that we've, at least as far as I can tell, the same language that we've used before. We can note, I don't know if we even need to vote on it. I think we can just note it. I guess it's up to the group, but just to move it forward quickly, like quicker. I think we're.
This is Dr. Hicks's presentation.
No.
What's the number of it?
Regulatory, it's
Prop-
just.
Prop A2.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Prop A1.
2.
A2.
Thank you.
Yeah. Or if we want to vote on it, I'm put forth a motion to vote on prop to pass or to approve or recommend proposition A2. Proposal, thank you. Proposal A2. Thank you.
Any objections? Nope. Unanimous. Now on to Prop A3.
I looked at this one, and it does look like it's just to, as it says here, accommodation of the transition of management on IPHC regulatory 2A. It has some additional language in there that kind of allows for that and makes it more clear. So I suggest we either just approve or move on, whatever. I think it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm. So there's a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Miles, thank you. Any objections? Unanimous. On to Prop A4.
Once again, I think that this is more of just a housekeeping with changing certain verbiage. If someone wants, we have Basha here to help us. If someone has a question about a specific section of this, but I think again, I'd like to move on quickly if we can.
Heather?
I move we adopt, I guess.
Okay.
Or I'd recommend.
Okay.
I don't see anything wrong with it.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Dave. Any objections?
Oh, thank
Oh,
you.
sorry.
Sorry, Norm.
Norm, missed you.
Yeah, no worries, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. In section 1, in the change of re-elections, the top line there, the 26-inch in length limit, is that a change? Or is that an addition or is that a change? Is that size limit different than what it used to be?
I think if you go down in the appendix, it sort of spells out exactly what the changes are going to be. Page 2 and page 3.
Basha, can you,
Yes.
I guess, speak to that? Are we changing, from what I understand, we're just defining TCEY there, and it has nothing to do with the limit, the size limit listed. Has that size limit changed?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Yes, so the proposal A4 is really for the consistency of the regulations overall. So it has nothing to do with how the fishery is executed. It's just for the consistency of the language. We realized that the TCUY, what it is, was never defined. So the acronym of TCUY was never used in a full form. So now we have that as a part of the definitions. But it's just a definition taken from the usually used definition for the TCUYs, but it has nothing to do with actual TCUYs decisions that are made.
Thank you.
With that definition, any objections? None. Unanimous. And going on to Prop B1.
Basha, if you could, from what I can understand, this is the normal proposition that's put forth by NOAA to set our standards for the charter fishery.
That is correct. This proposal provides a framework for the recreational management measure for the charter sector in IPHC regulatory areas 2C and 3A. So it really provides a framework, but the actual measures are kind of deducted from the mortality limits that are decided. So overall, on Thursday, we'll have a decision on that framework be decided based on mortality limits. But we have also here NOAA Fisheries if you have any specific questions.
Note this, and unless if somebody else would like to put forth a motion, we'll just note this proposal.
What's the motion need to be?
We don't need one.
We don't need one. We can just note it.
We're skipping it.
Heather?
So we're looking at the next one now, right?
Yeah.
So this one, I believe, is the one that increases the daily bag limit for recreational fishing in 2B from 2 to 3.
Yes.
And speaking, I don't know if there's any sport fish folks in the room, but
Yes,
yeah,
we do.
I do know that in conversation with U.S. Sport fish interests, they have expressed opposition to this. I just want to put that on the table. I'm not a sport fish person.
I'll introduce myself. I'm Mark Nation. I'm chair of the Sport Fishing Advisory Board in British Columbia, and past chair of the Elephant Committee, was chair of the Elephant Committee for over a decade. I'm not sure I can add much to what the Canadian commissioners had to say. I mean, really, from the perspective of the sport fishery in Canada, this is about the ability to manage halibut domestically to meet our TAC. There's never been an intent to create a marketing advantage as a result of this. Although, for clarity's sake, if it was locked in regulation, the potential does exist. With sincerity, as somebody who's been involved in the process for well over 25 years, that the intent of this is to ensure that the recreational fishery in 2B, which is closely monitored, closely managed, has an overage provision, which is unique on the coast, whereby if we do exceed our TAC, that amount is deducted from our TAC the following year domestically. So it's always been a highly precautionary approach to management. I think a lot of that was spoken about. And the intent here is to ensure that the recreational fishery is incentivized to adopt a precautionary approach at the beginning of the season, with the idea that if it looks like we're going to be well under our TAC, there's an opportunity to bring that catch closer to what the recreational fishery in 2B is allocated. So that is really the intent. So I don't want to take up a lot of your time. If there's specific questions, I'm happy to answer them.
In the past, Mr. Chairman, this group has no action on issues that were specifically related to the PAB's business interests. I don't know if that's still, the policy is kind of informal, I guess. It just makes it easier if we don't have to argue something that we aren't directly involved in.
Yeah, John.
I agree with you, Heather. I guess I have a question. The 2C recreational quota is a number that's etched in bronze, if you will. Whereas in the Gulf areas, I think it's just whatever the catch is, and somehow it's accounted for. But I think in 2C or 2B, you actually have a number that a quota, if you will, as a group that you fish to, correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, okay. And so if you go, if you're under that number, can you bank those fish going forward?
No, we only get it charged to the following year if we go over there.
I see, okay, got it.
Provision, if we're under, it's left in the water.
But if you're over in 2022, then you pay for it in 2023.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. I was just curious.
And Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Peggy.
Different from Canada.
So if we're taking no action, we don't need to vote on that, I would assume.
Yep.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Is everybody, I should have asked, is everybody, or Carl, you can ask.
Is everyone okay with taking no action on this proposal? Yes. Okay. On to, is that B2?
We're on to B3.
On to B3. So again, Jessie?
I would just say, similar to Heather's point, this is also on the recreational fishery. I would put forth, maybe we, again, take no action.
No action. Dave?
past, we have taken action
Oh.
on proposals similar to this, where they were,
Okay.
you know, requesting to be able to plan or requesting that, you know, just think that, just off the top of my head, I mean, I'm usually just against this kind of stuff.
Sure.
It's fine.
We're happy to take a vote, Dave, if you want to,
No,
for sure.
It's just, it doesn't seem like anybody really is bothering anybody.
Okay.
I guess
Jessie.
just to add to that note, the commissioners yesterday at the delegation were not interested in this proposal at all. It did not, it was not going, it doesn't sound like it's going to pass. They don't believe, NOAA is strongly, very, very strongly against this, so.
Norm?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would maybe think it might not be a terrible idea to take a vote on this one, just to show support. Everybody that I know on the conference board is opposed to this. I know that enforcement is opposed to this, and this might be an instance where maybe the PAB would show some recognition or some support to the conference board in upholding this.
Okay,
Sorry,
do you want to put a
opposing.
motion together, Norm? Ben?
Sure. I would move to vote in opposition of an approval for a recreational fishery to consume, to process, against process or consumption of Pacific halibut prior to landing.
Oh, perhaps. I think we're talking about, I apologize that I missed.
We're on B3.
B3,
Yeah.
correct.
Proposed by NOAA, which I think
Oh,
they were in support of, is the more complicated proposal, I think C3.
Oh, C3.
Dasha?
Thanks, Tyler. I apologize.
Yeah. If I may
Yes.
add and just clarify a couple of things. We have 3 separate proposals related to onboard consumption. One is proposal B4 that came from NOAA Fisheries. This is the most restrictive proposal that allows only one fledge of a fish to be consumed. We have, additionally to that, we have 2 separate stakeholders proposals, C1 and C3, that relate to the exactly same topic. The third one, the C3, is related to only 2C, so it's much more constrained in terms of its applicability. But C1 allows much more flexibility than NOAA proposal. So there are kind of 3 variations of this onboard consumption proposal, but we can take action on like all of them. But when it comes to actually applying it in the IPHC regulations, we'll have to kind of consolidate that language in terms of what kind of measures would be allowed.
I just wanted to ask, thank you. I just wanted to ask if Norm believes that this is the proposal that people are opposing, because is this the one then? Norm?
Yep.
I believe that was my fault. I confused proposition B3 and C1. So Tyler, thank you so much for that clarification. Tyler is right. NOAA put forth this as one, they can consume 1 fillet per board. Yesterday at the delegation, NOAA was again put this forth and is in support.
Yeah, I was confused as well.
I apologize.
No, I thought the same thing. So I'm just asking if Norm is clear on that, and this is one that he believes the conference board opposes as well. So
I think that the conference board opposes any proposal that provides the opportunity to butcher fish. I guess I didn't follow through. I didn't read all of the proposals and didn't understand clearly that there are other ones that address this, that speak to this as well. So my motion would just speak to this proposal, B3.
Heather?
Mr. Chairman, I believe I'm going to abstain on this one because I think personally ought to stay out of it.
Okay, we didn't have a second for Norm's motion. Mm-mm. So that brings us back full circle, I guess, if we want to take no action. Any objection? Any objection? Okay.
I think
All
we're
right. No action. Okay. Could probably just get B4 finished before we wrap up for the day. Yeah.
Oh, please, Basha, if you'd like.
Yes.
I was just going to suggest we can discuss C1 and C3, I guess, because they're very closely related to B.
Jessie?
If I may very quickly, maybe I'll be wrong again, but I think I am. I got this one, but this is, I don't know if the gentleman from Washington for NOAA is here, but this is just adding a different logbook. So that way fishermen in 2A can use the same logbook for rockfish that they can for halibut. So I guess before they had, from my understanding, they had used two separate logbooks, and now this just allows them to use the same logbook.
Sorry, I am here.
Oh, great. Yes, you speak to this, please.
Again, you guys did a great job describing it. It's just a new logbook that we have down in the West Coast region that's required for fixed gear fishermen, and this just would allow it to be sufficient for IPHC purposes for turning in logbooks. That's all it is.
Basha?
And if I may just add, and we also, as during the meeting, you might have heard that we had a discussion that IPHC will be working with NOAA Fisheries to look into data sharing arrangements so that we can get directly the data that is provided through that new logbook to our database. So that's providing some additional relief to the fishermen.
So does anyone put forward a recommendation to recommend this proposal? John, you're smiling.
I'm just going to get ready to pick my nose, that's all. Yes, I move we recommend. I'm not sure I understand this one, but it sounds it's pretty straightforward, and it's just a logbook. And so it's record keeping. So I recommend we recommend this, what's this called? A regulatory language suggestion.
Prop B4.
Prop B4. There you go. Thank you.
Seconder?
Second.
Any objection? No. Unanimous. Okay. We'll adjourn for today and pick this up at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Thank you.
They have.
We got 2 minutes. Yes, if we can. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, okay.
So proposals C1 and C3, they are related also to on-board consumption. So it's really, if you took no action on B3, I guess there is an option to take no action on these now, but we are available to provide additional comments on these.
Thank you. Group move for no action on these two proposals. C1 and C3, correct? Any abstentions? No. Unanimous. Okay. Thank you. Now adjourn until tomorrow. Thank you.